Sarah Martinez wiped the sweat from her forehead as she finished cleaning the last rifle on the shooting range. The afternoon sun blazed overhead at the remote military training facility in Afghanistan, where she worked as a civilian contractor maintaining weapons and equipment. At 28 years old, she had been doing this job for 3 years, earning good money to support her family back home in Texas, while her husband served his own deployment elsewhere in the region. The shooting range was her responsibility every Tuesday and Thursday. She meticulously cleaned each weapon, checked ammunition supplies, and ensured everything was ready for the next training session. Today felt different, though. There had been unusual radio chatter all morning, and several training exercises had been mysteriously canceled. The base seemed on edge, but Sarah focused on her work, finding comfort in the familiar routine of disassembling, cleaning, and reassembling the various firearms. As she worked on a particularly dirty M4 carbine, Sarah noticed how quiet the range had become. Usually, there would be soldiers training, instructors shouting commands, or at least the distant sound of vehicles moving around the base. Today, an eerie silence had settled over everything. Even the birds seemed to have stopped singing. She glanced at her watch and realized she was running behind schedule. The evening shift change was in 2 hours, and she still had 6 more rifles to clean. Sarah had always been detail-oriented, a trait that served her well in this job, where an improperly maintained weapon could mean the difference between life and death for the soldiers who used them. She had grown up around guns on her family's ranch, learning to shoot before she could properly tie her shoes. Her father had taught her that respect for firearms meant keeping them in perfect condition, and she carried that philosophy into her professional work. The job wasn't glamorous, but it was important. Every weapon that passed through her hands could save a life or protect innocent people. She took pride in her work, even when others might see it as just cleaning equipment. Sarah knew that somewhere, a soldier would depend on the weapon she was preparing, and that knowledge drove her to perfection in every detail. As she began working on the 7th rifle, a sudden rumble in the distance made her pause. It sounded like heavy vehicles approaching, but they weren't coming from the direction of the main gate. The sound was growing louder and seemed to be coming from multiple directions. Sarah set down the rifle and walked to the window of the range building, trying to get a better view of what was happening. Through the dusty glass, she could see dust clouds rising in the distance. Multiple vehicles were indeed approaching the base, and they were moving fast. Something about their formation and speed made her stomach tighten with unease. This wasn't a planned arrival or a routine patrol returning. The vehicles were moving with the urgency of an attack or emergency response. Sarah's training as a contractor had included basic security protocols. She knew where the emergency communication devices were located and had been briefed on what to do in various threat scenarios. However, those briefings had always seemed theoretical. She had never imagined she would actually need to use that knowledge. The base had always felt secure, protected by multiple layers of security and professional military personnel. The radio in the range building crackled to life with urgent chatter. She couldn't make out all the words, but the tone was unmistakably one of crisis. Words like hostile, breach, and immediate cut through the static. Sarah felt her heart rate increase as the reality of the situation began to sink in. This wasn't a drill or a planned exercise. Something real and dangerous was happening. Moving quickly, Sarah began securing the weapons she had been cleaning. Protocol dictated that in an emergency, all firearms should be properly stored and accounted for. Her hands shook slightly as she worked, but her training took over. She had rehearsed these procedures countless times, though never under actual threat conditions. Each weapon had to be properly secured to prevent them from falling into the wrong hands. The sound of the approaching vehicles was now clearly audible, accompanied by what sounded like shouting in the distance. Sarah tried to contact the main security office using the radio, but received only static in response. Either the communication systems were down, or everyone was too busy dealing with the crisis to respond to her calls. She was effectively cut off from information about what was happening and what she should do. Looking out the window again, Sarah could now see the vehicles more clearly. They weren't military vehicles she recognized, and some appeared to be civilian trucks and cars. This was definitely not a planned military operation. The realization hit her like a physical blow. The base was under attack. Her secure, routine world had suddenly become a dangerous and unpredictable situation where her survival might depend on decisions she made in the next few minutes. Sarah grabbed the emergency lockdown procedures from the wall and began following them step by step. First, secure all weapons and ammunition. Second, establish communication with security forces. Third, move to designated safe areas. But, as she tried to implement these procedures, it became clear that the situation was evolving too quickly for the standard protocols to be effective. The sound of gunfire erupted in the distance, confirming her worst fears. This was a full-scale attack on the base. Sarah realized that her knowledge of weapons and her location in the armory building might make her either a valuable asset or a dangerous target. She had to make a choice about whether to stay hidden and hope for rescue, or try to actively help defend the base with the resources available to her. As explosions began to rock the base, Sarah made her decision. She would not hide and wait to be rescued. Her father had taught her that when trouble comes, you face it head-on with whatever tools you have available. In this case, her tools were an intimate knowledge of weapons, a building full of firearms and ammunition, and the determination to protect herself and others. She began preparing for whatever was coming next, knowing that the next few hours would test everything she had learned about courage, survival, and the true meaning of duty. The explosions grew closer and more frequent as Sarah worked frantically to prepare defensive positions within the range building. She had moved the cleaned weapons to strategic locations and was now loading magazines with methodical precision. Her hands had stopped shaking as the adrenaline focused her mind on survival. Through the windows, she could see smoke rising from several locations around the base, and the sound of automatic weapons fire was becoming constant. Suddenly, the door to the range building burst open. Sarah spun around, expecting to see hostile forces, but instead found herself facing 3 American soldiers in full combat gear. They were moving fast and looked battle-worn, with dirt and sweat covering their faces. The lead soldier, whose uniform identified him as a Navy SEAL, quickly scanned the room, and his eyes locked onto the weapons Sarah had prepared. "Ma'am, we need you to evacuate immediately," the SEAL said urgently. "The base perimeter has been breached in multiple locations. We're conducting a fighting withdrawal to the secure compound, but we need to move now." Sarah looked at the weapons she had prepared, and then back at the soldiers. "I can help," she said firmly. "I know these weapons better than anyone, and you're going to need every advantage you can get." The SEAL studied her for a moment, taking in her confident demeanor and the professional way she had arranged the weapons. "What's your background?" he asked quickly. 3 years maintaining weapons here. Grew up shooting on a ranch in Texas, and I can field strip and reassemble any of these rifles blindfolded," Sarah replied. "Plus, I know the layout of this base better than most people." Another explosion rocked the building, closer than before. The SEAL made a quick decision. "Grab what you can carry. We're going to have to fight our way to the rally point." He handed her a tactical vest and helmet from his pack. "Stay between us and follow my lead." As they prepared to leave, Sarah quickly gathered extra magazines and selected a rifle she knew was perfectly zeroed. The SEAL watched approvingly as she checked the weapon with professional efficiency. "What's your name?" he asked. "Sarah Martinez," she replied, adjusting the unfamiliar weight of the tactical gear. "I'm Chief Petty Officer Marcus Thompson," he said. "These are Petty Officers Rodriguez and Kim. We're going to get you out of here." They moved out of the building in a tactical formation, with Sarah positioned in the center of their group. The scene outside was chaotic. Several buildings were burning, and the sounds of combat echoed from multiple directions. Sarah could see bodies on the ground and abandoned equipment scattered around. The reality of war had arrived at what she had considered a safe assignment. As they moved toward the secure compound, they encountered their first group of hostile forces. The attackers were using the base's own vehicles and had managed to penetrate deep into what should have been secure areas. Chief Thompson signaled for the group to take cover behind a concrete barrier and immediately began coordinating their response to the threat. "Sarah, can you handle the rifle at that range?" Thompson asked, pointing toward a group of attackers about 200 yards away. Sarah shouldered the weapon and acquired her target through the scope. "I've got clear shots on 3 of them," she confirmed. "On my mark," Thompson said, preparing his own weapon. "Rodriguez, you take the vehicle. Kim, watch our 6. Sarah, eliminate the targets on the left side of their formation." The coordinated attack was swift and effective. Sarah's shots were precise, dropping her targets cleanly while the SEALs handled the remaining threats. As they prepared to move again, Thompson looked at her with new respect. "Where did you learn to shoot like that?" "My father was a competitive marksman," Sarah explained as they advanced. "He taught me that if you're going to shoot, make every round count." They continued moving toward the rally point, encountering several more groups of hostile forces along the way. Each engagement tested Sarah's ability to perform under combat stress, and each time she proved herself capable of contributing meaningfully to their defense. The SEALs began treating her less like a civilian they were protecting and more like a member of their team. When they reached the secure compound, they found a desperate situation. The base commander and about 40 military personnel had established a defensive perimeter, but they were severely outnumbered and running low on ammunition. The attackers had somehow obtained detailed intelligence about the base layout and had coordinated their assault to maximize chaos and confusion. Chief Thompson immediately reported to the senior officer present, a Marine colonel named Stevens. "Sir, we've brought additional support," he said, indicating Sarah. "She's a weapons specialist and has proven herself under fire." Colonel Stevens looked skeptical until Thompson described their running battles to reach the compound. "We need every capable person we can get," the colonel finally acknowledged. "The situation is critical. We've lost communication with higher headquarters, and extraction is at least 6 hours away." Sarah found herself assigned to help coordinate ammunition distribution and weapons maintenance for the defending forces. Many of the soldiers were using weapons that had become fouled or damaged during the prolonged fighting. Her expertise in weapons maintenance became crucial as she worked to keep their defensive capability intact. As the afternoon wore on, the attackers launched several coordinated assaults on the compound. Each time, Sarah found herself playing an increasingly important role in the defense. She had positioned herself where she could provide both sniper support and technical assistance to other defenders. Her calm professionalism under fire earned the respect of even the most experienced soldiers. During one particularly intense assault, Sarah noticed that one of the defensive positions was running low on ammunition and had several soldiers with jammed weapons. Without waiting for orders, she gathered supplies and crawled across open ground under fire to reach them. She quickly cleared the weapon malfunctions and distributed fresh ammunition, allowing that position to continue holding their sector. Chief Thompson, who had been watching her actions, approached her during a brief lull in the fighting. "You're not a civilian anymore," he said seriously. "You're a warrior, and you've earned the right to be here." As the sun began to set, the situation grew more desperate. The attackers had brought in reinforcements and were preparing what appeared to be a final major assault. The defenders were exhausted, running low on ammunition, and facing overwhelming odds. It was clear that the next few hours would determine whether any of them would survive to see rescue arrive. Colonel Stevens gathered the remaining defenders for what might be their final briefing. "Intelligence suggests they're planning a coordinated assault from 3 directions at dawn," he announced grimly. "We're going to make our stand here, and we're going to make it count." Sarah looked around at the faces of the soldiers preparing for what could be their last battle. These men and women had welcomed her as one of their own, and she was determined to prove worthy of their trust. She checked her weapon one final time and prepared to face whatever the morning would bring, knowing that her transformation from civilian contractor to combat veteran was now complete. The night passed with sporadic probing attacks as the hostile forces tested the compound's defenses. Sarah had volunteered for watch duty, using her marksmanship skills to provide overwatch while others tried to rest. She had found a position on the 2nd floor of the command building that gave her excellent visibility across the compound's perimeter. Through her scope, she could see the attackers positioning equipment and moving personnel in preparation for their dawn assault. As the first hint of light appeared on the horizon, Sarah could see the full extent of what they were facing. The attackers had positioned vehicles at 3 points around the compound, exactly as intelligence had predicted. They had also brought in heavy weapons, including what appeared to be mortars and rocket-propelled grenades. The odds were overwhelming, but the defenders had spent the night preparing the best defensive positions possible with their limited resources. Chief Thompson appeared at Sarah's position carrying extra ammunition and a communication headset. "Colonel Stevens wants you coordinating sniper fire," he said. "You've got the best eyes and the steadiest hands among us. Can you handle calling targets for the other marksmen?" Sarah accepted the headset and tested the communication link with the 3 other sniper positions around the compound. She had never been responsible for coordinating fire before, but her knowledge of weapons and ballistics made her a natural choice. "I've got clear observation of all 3 assault positions," she reported to Colonel Stevens. "Ready to coordinate defensive fire on your command." The attack began with a mortar barrage that shook the entire compound. Explosions erupted around the defensive positions as the attackers tried to suppress the defenders before their ground assault. Sarah kept her position despite the falling debris and maintained communication with the other snipers, waiting for the infantry assault that would inevitably follow the barrage. When the ground attack began, it came from all 3 directions simultaneously. Sarah began calling targets, directing the compound's limited sniper fire at key personnel and weapon systems among the attacking forces. Her calm voice over the radio helped coordinate a defense that was more effective than their numbers should have allowed. "Target vehicle commander at position Alpha, range 300 meters, she called out, watching as one of the other snipers eliminated the threat. "Mortar team at position Bravo, prioritized the weapon system." The battle was intense and chaotic, but Sarah's coordination helped the defenders make their limited ammunition count. She could see that the attackers had expected less organized resistance and were having trouble adapting to the coordinated defensive fire they were receiving. During the height of the assault, Sarah noticed that Chief Thompson and his team were pinned down in an exposed position. A hostile machine gun had them trapped, and they couldn't move without being cut down. Without hesitation, Sarah shifted her attention to the machine gun position and began engaging it with precise fire. Her first shot disabled the weapon, but the crew quickly moved to a backup position. Sarah adjusted her aim and continued engaging, drawing their attention away from Thompson's team. "Chief, you're clear to move," she called over the radio. "I've got the machine gun suppressed." As Thompson's team reached safety, he looked up towards Sarah's position and gave her a thumbs up that she could see through her scope. That moment of acknowledgement meant more to her than any medal or commendation could have. She had proven herself not just as a supporter, but as an integral part of the fighting team. The battle continued for 3 hours, with waves of attackers trying to breach the compound's defenses. Each time, the coordinated defensive fire that Sarah helped direct managed to repel them, though the cost was mounting. Several defenders had been wounded, and ammunition was running critically low. Just as it seemed the situation might become hopeless, the sound of helicopters appeared in the distance. Sarah could see through her scope that the attacking forces had also heard the aircraft and were beginning to withdraw from their positions. The extraction that Colonel Stevens had promised was finally arriving. The helicopters turned out to be attack aircraft that immediately began engaging the retreating hostile forces. Within minutes, the organized attack on the compound had turned into a rout as the attackers found themselves caught in the open by superior firepower. Sarah continued to provide overwatch, calling out targets for the aircraft until the immediate threat was eliminated. As rescue helicopters began landing in the compound, Sarah finally allowed herself to relax. She had been in combat mode for over 18 hours, and the exhaustion hit her all at once. Chief Thompson appeared at her position again, this time with a smile on his face. "Outstanding work," he said, offering her a hand up from her shooting position. "You saved lives today with your coordination and marksmanship." As they walked toward the evacuation helicopters, Colonel Stevens approached them. "Martinez," he said formally, "I'm recommending you for the Civilian Service Medal for Valor Under Fire. Your actions today went far beyond what anyone could have expected from a contractor." Sarah looked around at the compound that had been her workplace just yesterday morning. It was damaged and scarred, but still standing thanks to the courage and skill of the people who had defended it. She realized that she had discovered something about herself during this crisis. She was capable of far more than she had ever imagined. The helicopter ride to the main base gave Sarah time to process what had happened. She had started the day as a civilian contractor doing routine maintenance work. She was ending it as a combat veteran who had played a crucial role in defending against a major attack. The experience had changed her permanently, giving her confidence and skills she never knew she possessed. When they reached the main base, Sarah was debriefed by intelligence officers who wanted to understand exactly what had happened during the attack. Her detailed knowledge of the weapons used and the tactics employed by both sides made her testimony valuable for preventing future incidents. Chief Thompson found her after the debriefing. "I wanted you to have this," he said, handing her the rifle he had been carrying during the battle. "You've earned the right to keep it. Anytime you want to transition from contractor to military service, you let me know. The teams can always use someone with your skills and courage." Sarah accepted the rifle, understanding the significance of the gesture. In the military culture, a weapon was more than just equipment. It represented trust, respect, and belonging. By giving her his rifle, Chief Thompson was acknowledging that she had truly become one of them. Months later, Sarah would make the decision to transition from civilian contractor to military service. The events at the compound had shown her that she had found her true calling. She would eventually become one of the few women to serve with special operations units, using the skills and confidence she had discovered during that terrifying day when she had been just cleaning the range before the raid began. The experience had taught her that courage isn't the absence of fear, but the decision to act despite fear when action is needed. She had learned that ordinary people can achieve extraordinary things when circumstances demand it, and that the most important battles are often fought by people who never expected to be warriors. Sarah kept Chief Thompson's rifle throughout her subsequent military career, a constant reminder of the day she discovered who she really was. It served as a symbol of the trust and respect she had earned from some of the most elite warriors in the world, simply by doing what needed to be done when everything depended on it. Years later, when she told the story to new recruits, she would always emphasize that heroism isn't about seeking glory or recognition. It's about being prepared, staying calm under pressure, and making the decision to stand up when others need you to stand up. Those lessons, learned during a single day of combat, would guide her throughout a distinguished military career that began with cleaning rifles and ended with leading some of the most important missions of her generation.